every market has its own lingual, every market has its own kind of language and the words people use. Because at the networking events, not only will you have the HR people that would manage the first kind of round of screenings, but then you'll also have they would bring people like such as myself who work in the area ready to talk to these students about what we do every day. Nothing beats face-to-face connection.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast. It's Charlene here. And today we have a really special guest, Chun Chang. He has over 10 years of experience in investment banking, and he's currently a research analyst at a large American bank. And before this, he worked at Morgan Stanley, and his expertise lies in fixed income, foreign exchange, FX, and monetary policy. Today, we have a lot of young professionals or those even students who are still studying at university. So I wanted to ask if for those people who are aspiring to join an investment bank later on, what are some key factors to consider when deciding to join an investment bank or overall the investment banking sector? Do you have any advice for those people?
I think key factors to consider is kind of understanding your asset class. For example, like I joined fixed income and interest rate research, and because I knew like my first job was at Bank of Canada that was dealing with interest rates, and I knew even prior to that, I was always interested in the macro economy. I kind of grew up during the time of the financial crisis, and I was reading the newspaper back then about what are bailouts, what's cutting interest rate, what are quantitative easing. Like these were all topics that really interested me. So like I just started digging a little bit and learning about them, and then I realized, oh, okay, this is all macro related, and these are very tied to the fixed income market. So I think if there's someone that's still in school or just starting out, it's really to understand the asset class that you're interested in. For example, if you're interested in tech stocks, then maybe you should not join the fixed income desk, right? You should join the equity desk. Maybe you
Yeah,
should be the
true.
dealer for Taiwanese equities that specialize in tech stocks, or be the research analyst for that area. So, or if you're very passionate about, let's say, commodities, or compassionate about natural gas, then maybe you should join the commodity desk. So I think it's really to know what appeals to you, and not every asset class appeals to everybody. For example, like I personally don't find, I know we both took CFA, but I personally don't
Mhm.
find fundamental analysis on equities to be that interesting for me. So
Okay.
hence, that's why I'm not in that part of the market. But other people will. So I feel like it's really important just to know what appeals to you, and once you find that what appeals to you, then you just keep digging deeper. Because when you do go for those interviews, that type of knowledge will show up. So I was mentioning earlier before, um, like when I was still working for the public sector with the Australian government, I went to a lot of bond market conferences and learned how the Chinese interest rate market worked. And when I was interviewing, I was able to use a lot of the frameworks and terminology that they talked about. And every market has its own lingual. Every market has its own kind of language, and the words people use. And if you can speak the same language as the people in that segment of the market, that would show, and then people will notice.
Yeah, that's really, really true. Yeah. Especially when you are in a really specific area like fixed income. I guess, a lot of things like for you mentioned CFA, which is make me quite interested as well to ask, for fixed income. I remember it was so it was the most confusing, I would say, subject among all of those asset classes. I mean, for me personally, duration, different durations, like all those kind of terminologies, just reminds me of those old times. And Chun, another question for you is like you mentioned, yeah, first of all, really
Yeah, no,
understand the
it's
asset
you're not
class.
alone.
Really understand the asset classes that you're interested in. I guess for a lot of people or fresh young graduates or young professionals, in order to make themselves really stand out, in this competition, if one really, really wants to join investment bank, and then how competitive the market is. So would you be able to give us some advice or, how can we stand out when applying for roles in investment banking if we want to be a bit generic or general, let's say,
Well, I
apart
would
from
say
really know your domain?
Well, I say definitely you got to be a bit proactive. Try often investment banks if you're situated at where the hub is. For example, Hong Kong is a hub.
Mm-hmm.
London is a hub. New York is definitely a hub. Uh, Paris is a hub to some extent these days. If you're one of these hubs, definitely as much as possible attend their networking events. Because at the networking events, not only will you have the HR people that would manage the first kind of round of screenings, but then you'll also have they would bring people like such as myself who work in the area already to talk to these students about what we do every day. And I do think the few times I've attended these events, the people that kind of as I mentioned, like that can speak the language, I would say, of certain asset class,
Mm-hmm.
those people definitely stand out, and then you kind of keep them in mind, and especially if you see the resume again, then you might try to give them an interview. So I think definitely, even though nowadays everything's online, we can connect virtually like we are today. I personally think nothing beats face-to-face connection. And just to shake that hand, just to talk to people, have that coffee, because I think those things still matters, especially if you're physically able to do it. If you live in one of the major financial centers that are hiring for analysts, and every year there's always a big American banks and big European banks, a class of analysts that they hire. So I think definitely, yeah, attend as much of those events as possible. And I will also say, when I was, in third, fourth year of university, I just tried to talk to as many people as possible because I think at that time, at first, it might be hard to really figure out, oh yes, I want to learn about Asia fixed income, or I want to learn about tech equities. You might not realize what you like yet. So that's why just talking to as many people as possible, understanding what they do day to day, and does that appeal to you? And I think I find for me, oftentimes that in these networkings, it's a very skewed outcome in the sense that maybe like 95% of the time you talk to someone, nothing comes about from it. But you just
Mm.
need that 1 out of 20 times that one person, when you talk
Oh,
to them,
I
they're
totally
actually
agree with that. Yeah.
or they actually tell you something critical that was very important in an interview or conversation later on. So I think for me, it's always been about just talking to many people as I can, and yeah, just learning about how the ecosystem works. Because I think if you expose yourself to those positive tail risks, those positive skewed risks, over time they'll pay off. Not every time, but over time you do it enough, I find that it's oftentimes it works in your favor. So I would say, yeah, for young people, definitely be at the hubs, right? Be it Hong Kong, Singapore, London, Paris, or New York. Um, Otherwise, yeah, just meet as many people and talk to as many people in industry as you can to really figure out which stream that you want to go to.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So at the end of the day, I feel it's also like a number game, right? Like out of 10, probably one or two persons are really, like really can be really helpful. And even one sentence that what is said, the information that they give can be really helpful as well. But you never know without attending those events, without being proactive. You may think, oh, this is useless, that person is useless, this conversation is useless. But at the end of the day, I would say it's really a number game as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Chun, for explaining it. So now my next question is apart from networking, apart from being proactive, apart from knowing your domain, like what you just mentioned. So do you like, for example, we also mentioned you are a CFA Charterholder, I'm a CFA Charterholder. So what skills or qualifications are essential for someone looking to enter the field of investment banking, for example? And yeah, just out of curiosity, since you mentioned you are a CFA charter holder, does it really help your career at all?
Well, okay, I think in terms of skills and qualification,
Yeah.
it depends on which role you're applying for. But I think most roles, I would say in general, communication skills is very important.
Hmm.
And it depends on which part of the market you work for. Because I've only so far in my career worked for on the sell side. So I work for banks, platforms, dealers. I haven't worked for buy side yet, but I interact with a lot of buy side people. So like I have
Hmm.
some idea of what they do. But I think pretty much on either side, your ability to explain clearly what you're thinking and why people should listen to you is a very important skill. Because at the end of the day, despite all the technologies we have, despite all these fancy tools, most of the time it comes down to the decision of some guy who has the power to press the button or make a decision. Will they do that? Right? As according to
Hmm.
what you say. And if you cannot explain yourself clearly in a articulate manner, whatever asset class or side of the market you are, then your ability to be successful is going to be limited. Even as a trader, you have a boss, right? And oftentimes your boss will set the risk limit. And if you cannot articulate to him or her clearly why you think we need to hold on to this losing position or we need to add further risk to this positions, then it's going to hamper your ability to be successful. So I think the first and foremost ability I would say is clear communication skills and really understand what you want to say. And it took me some time to realize this because you have to understand a lot about the market, you have to understand the fundamentals, you have to understand the flow. But once you kind of put all those together, learning how to package it in a way that other people can digest it. I think that is a communication skill, is definitely underrated in the industry. I'll say that's the first. Secondly, I think one thing that has changed a bit since at least 7 years that I've been in the sell side is the necessity to learn programming. Nowadays, when I see the insurance, either may it be from the trading side, maybe from the sales side, or maybe from even research, pretty much everybody has some form of programming skills. And most likely Python, because that's the language most people learn in school these days. And I think because Python has a very strong ecosystem of different libraries and tools to use, that's the ecosystem of Python is very strong in finance. And this is even more true, I think, on the buy side, on hedge funds and real money, kind of like mutual funds. The ability to process a lot of data is also part of the communication skills. We now live in a world of data. You can buy data that is very fancy. There's a lot of machine learning algorithms that can do a lot of fancy analysis for you. So being able to use those fancy tools and then being able to explain it in a human way, I think that is a very important skill for the industry. But to be able to do that, you need to know both the technical knowledge of working in the programming language and the package and the libraries, and then afterwards taking that technical solution and explain it in a human way to stakeholders. So I say communication and also, I guess, programming or ability to process data is increasingly important. Those are the two, I think, skills I will highlight. In terms of the CFA designation, I think,
or
you and I met.
CPA, whatever it is, there are so many qualifications that are available for finance professionals, right?
Yeah, so I can't speak to the other certificates because I never took them, but I did, take the CFA and I just paid my annual fee as well. So I think I have a little bit
paid
of
400 or something as well, right?
to comment on this matter. I think it's definitely useful as a foundational knowledge. As you mentioned earlier, I think CFA was very broad and it taught me a lot of concepts that I wasn't aware of, like active management in the equities world, or like wealth management and some of the derivatives that I may not encounter every day. So I think as a exposure for knowledge, I thought it was pretty useful. But I think for me specifically, because I obtained the CFA after 3 years in the industry already. I was already working at Morgan Stanley. So I think for me personally, it hasn't really at least got me a new job, right? I think there are benefits to being a CFA Charterholder. You can attend their events. There's some volunteering events that you can also attend. You can do some networking. So I'm not discounting those opportunities, but at least for me personally, it hasn't really changed my working situation, because I think by the time I got the past the level 3 and got the Charterholder, I was already I already have my foot in the industry. But for someone who may not have their foot in the industry, or someone who may not take a finance undergrad and doesn't know what blockchain is, then I think it could be very useful. But I think I would take it more from it's a knowledge perspective than thinking it as a ticket to getting employment somewhere.
Yeah, I could totally relate as well